complete streets, but then I will ask for your recommendation.
Yeah, that's right. And I think our recommendation is that we circulate staff comments and and have it on an agenda for some public input at our next meeting.
Perfect. Perfect.
Okay, it looks like we're broadcasting.
Not at Boston's Island.
Hey, Dan.
Hello, John. How are you?
Evening, Dan.
Oh, Doug.
You're going to have an ordinance committee meeting on the 14th.
Yes, I saw the email. It's in my calendar.
Good. And I met an interesting person, somebody who writes ordinances on short-term rentals.
That's my dream job.
Used to be a fireman down in Rockport.
Yeah.
So I've invited him to participate in the meeting on Monday morning.
Okay.
Okay, I'm starting the recording. Mr. Chair, we're still about 3 minutes out from the start of the meeting time, but we're recording and we're live broadcasting right now.
Yeah, we only have 3, so we can't really start anyways.
We'll do the noise part first with Tammy and Peter doesn't have anything else to add to ordinance.
You got a flag in your office, Peter? We don't have a flag because Tony's not here.
I got time to go to the basement?
I can find one. Don't start the meeting until I come back.
I have a printer.
I think we're good, so we can, as soon as I find one, I'll let you know.
Sharon, you don't have a flag? Lovely to hear your lips move, but we can't hear your speaking.
I have one on the back of my garage, but
Now you have to walk out with your computer to do it.
I can't do that. I'll
Hey,
lose
Sarah.
you.
Hi, everybody.
Sarah,
I'm
do
gonna adjust my light.
you have a flag handy?
Peter went to go get one. I think we'll be good.
And Sarah, I found an interesting person to help us with the short-term rental ordinance. Guy from the Rockport Fire Department who writes these ordinances now for a living
Oh,
And-
yeah?
and lives in South Freeport.
You gonna help us do it for free?
He is a member of the community. It should be
Oh,
something we should ask of him.
well, we can take that offline.
Good. He'll be part of the meeting on the 14th.
Oh, was that one that was
Yeah,
scheduled?
Monday the 14th, 7:30.
Okay. All right, I will put it in my calendar.
Justin Ford.
It's 7:30 in the morning?
Yep.
Okay.
We have a quorum, we have a town manager, and we have a flag.
And it's 6:30. All right, well, we do have 4 counselors here, so we can start the meeting. Peter, are we all set to go with technology? Recording? Okay. I'll call the meeting to order. This is Freeport Town Council meeting number 19-20, taking place on the Zoom virtual platform this evening. It is Tuesday, September 1st, 2020. The time is 6:30. We'll commence our meeting. I believe Councilor Lawrence might be joining us shortly after. Before I call attendance, I just want to remind folks who might be tuned in and listening that on the Zoom platform, there's a few steps that have to happen for the public to be recognized to speak. There's a raise hand feature on the computer screen, or *6 on your telephone will identify you by your name or phone number to address the council. We have a couple of places in the agenda this evening for public participation. When we get there, we'll invite folks to use that raise hand feature so that they can speak and address the council in live time. While all of us are on video, the participants from the public are not subject to a video camera, so it'll just be audio only. My apologies for that if you were hoping to get on the screen. We'll start with attendance for tonight's meeting. Councilor Riley.
Yes.
Councilor Pilch.
Here.
Councilor Tracy.
Here.
And the chair, John Egan, is here. Councilor Horn is excused with a family travel event, and Councilor Whitney is excused also with a family traveling event end of summer. I didn't hear from Councilor Lawrence. I imagine he'll be here shortly. Our first order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. Peter has got a flag available. Please recite the pledge if you're able to. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands,
And
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
for all.
Thank you, Peter. Our second order of business is to waive the reading of the minutes from meeting number 18-20 held on August 18th, 2020, and to accept the minutes as printed. Do we have any corrections or edits to the minutes before we take a motion to accept them?
So moved.
All right, accepting the minutes has been moved. Do we have a second?
Second.
Moved in second. I'll take the vote. As with all votes on the Zoom platform, we actually call out each individual counselor to make sure that we've got a proper recording of everyone's vote. So we'll do a roll call vote. Councilor Riley,
Yes.
Councilor Pilch,
Yes.
Councilor Tracy,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. The minutes are adopted. Thank you very much, Sharon. Excellent capture of our meeting 2 weeks ago. The third order of business are announcements. I have a couple to read, and then we can go around to see if others have some announcements. This will be a standing announcement all the way until the end of October, that absentee ballots for the November 3rd, 2020 election can be requested by contacting the town clerk's office at 865-4743, and that's extension 122 or 123. You can also go to the State of Maine website, maine.gov, and request one there. Ballots requested now, you can call today and request a ballot, will be mailed in the first week of October. Starting October 5th, voters may vote in person at Town Hall, voting early. More information on absentee voting and early voting can be found at freeportmaine.com. There are at least 3 ways for people to get access to a ballot and submit their vote for this upcoming election. I encourage anybody who has questions about how to get to that or wants to avoid the lines or the public exposure on November 3rd to go ahead and use the absentee ballot or early voting method. And please call our wonderful town clerk, Christine Wolf, and she will walk you through all of those opportunities. Nomination papers for the November 3rd, 2020 municipal election are due back no later than 6 p.m. next Wednesday. That's the 9th of September. That's just 8 days from today. For the following offices, there is a single seat for Councilor at Large. There is a single seat for Councilor District 2, and there is a single seat for Councilor District 3. The RSU 5 Board of Directors has 2 open seats, and the Sewer District Board of Trustees has 2 open seats, and the Water District Trustee has 1 open seat. I'll just note that if you have any interest in the Water District at this point, you may be running unopposed. No one has taken out papers to run for the Sewer District seat. We do hope we get someone interested in representing the community on the Water Board. If you've got information, again, please call Town Clerk Christine Wolf. Her phone number is 865-4743. Welcome, Council Lawrence. Glad to see you.
Thanks.
And that's the Freeport Water Board, not the South Freeport Water Board, correct?
It is the Freeport Water District. That's correct. Freeport Community Library has created a self-guided nature quest for children of all ages. The walk starts Friday, September 4th. That's this coming Friday at 10 a.m. and is available until Monday, September 14th at 4 p.m. This is a self-guided nature walk on the grounds of the library. There's a special prize for all finishers on opening day from 10 o'clock to 4:30. The event is free, as is everything at the library, and open to the public. For questions or directions to the library, please visit freeportlibrary.com or call at 865-3307. Any other announcements from councilors for this evening? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on. Our next item of business is the information exchange. This is a chance for councilors to share feedback and information from committees or other community groups that they've been engaged with. Do we have anybody that would like to share from recent committees of activity in the last 2 weeks? I have a announcement from Councilor Whitney, who would like to specifically thank Peter, Joseph, and Caroline Pelletier for swiftly helping with the high school today and assisting with the process of getting the right permits for the high school to be able to host a teacher's appreciation lunch. I much appreciated the efforts of our town staff assisting with RSU logistics in order for that event to happen. So says Councilor Whitney. Thank you. I attended the Hunter Road Fields Advisory Committee last week, and there were a couple of things on that agenda. Of course, a lot of the sports groups and athletic gatherings are very interested to get their players and students back out on the field, and they've all were very versant and comfortable with the protocol for any kind of gatherings. The entire facility has a gathering of 50 people. So it is important to note that while sports teams are out there at any given time, there's just 50 people allowed to congregate at the Hunter Road Fields facility, which is a challenge because there's lots of different sports teams. Sarah?
I just have a question about that because I thought outside the regs are that it's 100. Why is it 50 for Freeport?
100 broken into groups of 50 though. So I don't know. I don't think, John, you may want to, if I'm misstating the contents of the meeting and what you guys discussed, I was not there, so please correct me. But I think the marching orders from the town have been, everyone's welcome to use town facilities as long as you can meet the state standards. So
Right.
We're not imposing the state standards, but we are letting people know, doing events at Winslow Park or something like that, or, at the fire station in the Bay. We've talked about all these different things about group meetings and what they need to do, what they need to be wearing, masks or spacing or the minimum number of gatherings. Everyone's being super sensitive, especially with the Millinocket situation that happened, with making sure that we don't put a 50 plus or 100 plus, whatever it is, event into play. And that even if we do have under 50, that everybody's observing the correct protocols. So we won't tell somebody, we'll help them find the rules, but we won't, be interpreting the rules. We'll just say, yep, these are the numbers. You're going to meet that, right? They'll acknowledge it, and we'll document it. So in case anything does happen, we're very clear that they have to follow the state rules.
I stand corrected, and our town engineer, Adam Bliss, was coordinating and facilitating that meeting, so he can clarify, and I'll ask you, Adam, to do that in just a second. One of the other components of the Hunter Roads Fields Committee was to be able to accommodate the spacing and the pent-up demand, frankly, for use of that field. They asked, the user groups asked for the month of October to be able to start games on Sundays at 11. The policy of the facility is to start games at 12 on Sundays. We, as a group, determined that that was a reasonable accommodation to allow more time in between subsequent events that day on a Sunday, to allow crowds to disperse before new crowds are coming in. In order to meet the schedule for all of the user groups before it's dark, they asked if they could start a little bit earlier. The committee unanimously agreed that that was a very reasonable request and granted it. So in case anybody gets constituent calls about games on Sundays starting a little early, that's the reason why. Councilor Riley?
So involving this and the fact of the clarification on number of people who can be there, we do have a change coming up through the state to a different standard going forth. Can we put that on our electronic sign in front of public safety as to when that change takes place? I don't know that we can put in what the changes will be, but at least to signify when that change will be taking place and to check maine.gov for the change in regulations.
Are we
Not a bad
changing
idea to
phases?
indicate. I'm sorry, what'd you say, Karen?
I'm a little bit unclear. What is it that we're changing phases? What is the change that you're
It will
referring
be a change in phase coming up.
And is that date set?
I think it's a set date, but it may be flexible going back and forth.
Yeah, we can look at that. It may be useful to do some type of a phase banner or something like that on the website and on our sign there about, kind of like the red, green, yellow alert system or something like that. We'll look at that if that's possible. I can talk with Adam, who's on the meeting.
Right. Adam, could you please confirm the collection count or the limit for gatherings at a public facility if it's outdoor?
Sure thing. Up to 100. Groups of 50 have to be cordoned off, and they can't intermingle. So the idea is, no more than a group of 50 in an upper field, and no more than a group of 50 at a lower field, with more than a significant factor of safety in terms of separation.
Great. So thank you for clarifying my earlier comment. It's not hard, of course, for sports teams gatherings on any kind of a age group to have right up to 50 people when you have two teams plus coaches and then parents coming to watch their children play. So that'll be a tight regulation, and all of the user groups expressed a concern and sensitivity to that and be watching it. Councilor Tracy.
I just want to note that my children are part of one of the major user groups, and parents are not invited this fall. So they're taking the regulation quite seriously. It's quite unfortunate for those of us parents who have invested a lot of time in our children, careers or activities, but it's good to maintain safety. And I just say that so that to assure people that those regulations are there. Things in place for the regulations to be followed quite strictly.
Yep, very good. Any other announcements for this segment on the agenda? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to the town manager's report. Peter.
Chair, thank you very much. So I want to tack on to that and just express some gratitude here for everyone in town. That's town employees, that's our other public employees like school district employees. It's the residents in general. It's the business community for the level of adherence that we're seeing to the guidelines that Councilor Tracy just pointed out, and how seriously people are taking things. That includes the Hunter Road Fields portion of it and the school fields portion of it, and the businesses with lines out the door that are making people wear masks when they go in their businesses. It's really great to see. Obviously, there's no declaration of victory. This is a long uphill battle that's in front of us, but it's really good, and it makes me feel like we at least can keep a handle on things locally. Our infection numbers, for those that don't see those or have access to them, have been, since they started reporting them, must have been almost 2 months ago by zip code. It's gone from 17 to I think 22 right now, confirmed cases in Freeport. So we are seeing a trickle at best, and people in town are really doing their best to try to keep separation. So thank you to everybody. I see Deputy Chief Conley's here, but I know our employees over there, for example, are taking it very seriously. All of our employees doing what they have to do, doing what's being asked and required. And it's nice to see that people in this area of the state and in this state and this area of the country are taking it seriously, because you can see what happens throughout the country when they don't. I'm just very appreciative that it's everybody's efforts together that are getting us there. So thank you to everyone. So that being said, I think I don't need to speak about the sports groups. I think we talked about that, but there are a lot of uses coming up that I did want to, make the public aware of that. We are being very clear with folks that they, what the standards are, and it's great to hear that the sports leagues are taking that seriously with not even inviting the parents. That's sad to hear, but it's great to hear that they're doing that to keep people safe. So it's a kind of a two-edged sword there. Okay, so moving along, the West Street construction project, a brief update on that. We are expecting Adam's here. He can reach out and edit me or overspeak me if I'm saying anything wrong, but we're expecting traffic to be resumed. We're essentially going to be putting the guardrail up in the drop-off sections. Hopefully on Friday it's scheduled. It will not be paved for probably 2 weeks following that to allow settling time, to make sure that, there's not any pockets that develop underneath the pavement. But we will be reopening that to traffic, if not Friday, the beginning of next week. So thank you to everyone's patience. That's really a pretty intense project. If anyone's seen pictures of that, the cut that was done, how deep it went, and the amount of concrete culvert pieces that went into that, and the old bridge that came out of it, which is a cool little artifact that they found, about a 200-year-old timber bridge, 150, 200-year-old timber bridge down way underneath the roadbed from where the West Street Road used to be. Probably Dan, when they were still running a quarry up in your neighborhood, that's probably where what they were using to move it all to the train station. So really cool. You never know what you're going to find when they start digging in these projects. Historically, they found the same thing over on Hunter Road when we did the Hunter Road culvert, a similar age timber bridge that was essentially, surrounded by marine clay soil, really difficult construction conditions, and makes you impressed on how people built these roads 200 years ago or 150 years ago.
You're gonna move part of that bridge in with the street lamps that we.
I think it's all gone now and buried. So I've got a chunk of it here in the office. I asked Adam to save me a little piece of the wood. It's old growth. It's pretty interesting to look at. But
You mean to take pictures of it?
yeah, I can. I'll get it and I'll bring it in front of the camera here in about 30 seconds. One last little thing that I want to add before I end. It sounds like we've talked about almost all in the announcements, all the items that I had to announce. So I'm very happy with that. But it was brought to my attention that we have a minor celebrity here on our town boards and committees that we may not have known about. Andy Spalding, who is the chair of the Active Living Committee, was recently announced that he is going to be inducted to the Maine State Running Hall of Fame. So that's a pretty cool little anecdote. But if you know Andy, he's always running a road race, training for a marathon or something like that whenever I see him. So congrats to him. And I think that's a really cool sign of, that we've got the right people leading those type of committees if you've got somebody that committed to it. But there's a neat little article. I'll forward it out over email to the council. I just received it a couple minutes before the start of the meeting, but a write-up for him. So congrats to Andy, and keep up the good work. And I'll go, Mr. Chair, that's it. I'll go grab the chunk of wood to show Dan as you move on, okay?
Okay, very good. Thanks, Peter. Our next item is our first opportunity this evening to hear from the public. Hopefully Peter will be right back because he'll be the one moving you over to the active participant The public comment period is a part of every council agenda where the public has a chance to comment, ask questions, share concerns, air complaints, and generally discuss things with the council that are not on our regular agenda. I will note that we have 3 items on our agenda at the end of other business, including the complete streets, a discussion on the county tax structure, and how best to engage with our community on racial equity issues at the town. So those are the items that are on the agenda. I'd like to open the public comment period for anybody who is listening on Zoom or listening on your phone. This would be where you'd use the raise hand feature, and the manager will recognize you and move you over to an active participant, and you'll be in live time to address via audio only the council, and you'll have up to 3 minutes to share what you've got to say. This is a great chance for the council to hear firsthand from residents what's going on and what they're concerned about. We get a lot of emails. Unfortunately, most recently, I've gotten a lot of emails on the particular item related a couple of weeks ago to trash pickup. I was unable to answer all 150 or whatever it was that I got. So I'm working my way through that. But this is a way for us to hear directly from the public. And I'm talking here to give folks a little chance to muster up the courage to raise their hand and get on the meeting to address the council if they so choose. Peter, do we have anybody raising their hand?
Not at this time, Mr. Chair.
Okay. I'm going to give a little bit more time, 30 more seconds for anyone who just needs a little extra encouragement to go ahead and hit the raise hand feature or hit *6 on your telephone if you'd like to address the council on an item that's on your mind and that may not be on our mind, something that we may have overlooked or not be aware of yet. So I just want to make sure that folks have a chance to do that. It's quite clunky on Zoom. It's nothing like having someone sitting in the audience and raise their hand and then step up to the podium like we used to do when we had meetings at Town Hall. Hopefully that's coming back sometime over the next 3 to 6 months. But for now, we're on Zoom, and so you have to use the raise hand. Last chance, Peter. Anybody got
Yep,
their
I've got Nick Kent in the audience. I'll bring them over. Hi, you're live.
Good evening, Nick. What's on your mind?
I'm muted.
This isn't Nick and Amanda. It's Thais Vanderfer. We own Athena's Cantina and our little food truck on Route 1. I wanted to start off by saying thank you, Peter, and thank you, Caroline, so much for acting so quickly this afternoon to allow us to be able to participate in the teacher appreciation event tomorrow at Freeport High School. And thanks to Tani for making that happen so quickly. I wanted to just basically mention that I think it's important that the board put some attention to review some of the guidelines for our local businesses and our brick and mortars with food trucks, which at this time is just me, I believe. And just put some attention on that to just revise some issues that is continuing to go on.
It's the red pepper or red pepper.
I think that because if it wasn't for Tony, Caroline, and Peter, we wouldn't have been able to participate in this event that would make obviously a huge difference for our business and help us thrive and excel. I just think that it's important for us to review the zoning as far as allowing food trucks to participate in private events. I wasn't aware that it was going to cause such a stir and a big issue that put us in a very small time crunch. So it's frustrating and really stressful when we get stopped at every single turn we get ahead in one thing and then turn around, something else happens and we stall. And I I just hope that you guys really take the time to just revise it and just see which ways we can make it better and how we can change it to better accommodate our local businesses and potential food trucks being able to come in. Residents especially, it is very different. I mean, it should be different rules for coming in food trucks versus food trucks that we're trying to build a permanency here in Freeport. But it's just been a whirlwind of stress dealing with it and trying to make our business work in the best way we can during this time. And we follow the rules. We respect you so much and we really appreciate everything you do. But I think it just needs a little bit more attention to just details and also make it understandable for people to really, really understand and not have to stress out and not know if they're doing the right things by the town. So sorry, a little nervous, but thank you again for all your help and, you know, pushing this forward, because if it wasn't for you guys and your assistance, I think we'd still be kind of at a stop situation. And the school invited us and we were honored to be a part of that. And this is huge for us. And thank you again for that.
Thanks for bringing that forward, Amanda. Councilor Riley has a question, I believe.
No, actually, the statement. I believe this is an item that is under works in the planning board to change the ordinance for the structure on food trucks as we understand them today. Number one, and number two, I want to thank you for the excellent burrito that I had.
You're welcome.
But that's an important point, Amanda, that I might not have thought of or might have overlooked in my review in terms of the difference between a existing, ongoing, and open restaurant having a food truck function versus a food truck coming in from some other community to just park temporarily for sales. So thanks for pointing that out. We'll make sure that we take a look at that in our language review that Councilor Riley just highlighted. Councilor Pilch?
Just wanted to point out it's not Amanda, but Thais, who's joined us. And I wanted to shout out to Thais to say congratulations on the establishment and very rapid expansion of your business in very challenging times. It wasn't easy to open a restaurant just before COVID and then expand it to a food truck. So congratulations on that. It's a great addition to the community. And I'd encourage you to, I don't want to add work to your plate, but if you want to reach out and send us an email or send me an email with a kind of overview of how your experience has been establishing a business in Freeport. I know I'm curious to hear that and what obstacles you ran into. I'm aware of some of the issues at a high level, but I would assume that I might need some more education. So I'm curious to hear how your experience has been and see if there's anything that I can do to help advocate for you and other businesses in town.
Thank you very much. It's been a little bumpy road, but I look at my daughter Athena every day and I can't afford to give up. So, but we just want to be part of this community and bring what we can. We are starting Saturday nights a Veterans Bike Night, which is very important for us because we are a veteran-owned and operated business. We're so new that the exposure for us is so important right now. And I didn't want to seem so pushy, but you know, when you love something so much, you fight hard. So thank you.
And I wanted to say the reason why it's on Amanda is because Nick and I are right here with Thais supporting the council. It seems like Nick and I have become regular people coming to the council. So that's not always going to be the case. But when something seems just so wrong with the code, I'm one of the few people that really read the code. We were the ones who put through the food truck on behalf of Thais, but also on behalf of our business. And really, the big issue, I think, is in the activity permit language and approval process is very frustrating. Just because I think there are rules and regulations that aren't necessarily written in the code, but have become practiced by years of different things being done and certain precedences being said. And, you know, with a catering event, I searched on the code and there's only one time that a catering private event is listed, and that's listed under food trucks. Or no, it's listed under, well, I don't remember now. It's not important, but the point is that it became a big, difficult thing for her to do this when the school had invited her to be a part of this. And nobody really seemed to know how to get the approval through and to make this happen when it's a it should be a very easy thing. And particularly in this time with COVID and the limitations that we're all feeling. I mean, we still haven't opened Maine Wicked Goods just because it's such a small space and all of our workers are over 65 and are all health challenged. So we're struggling with trying to figure that out too. And we really appreciate all the everything the council has been doing to have good thinking about all that. So thank you again.
Thank you so much. And I speak for all businesses, and honestly, everybody is struggling through this. And I think it's important for us to come together as a community and know that our council and our town hall and our base of our community is behind us in any way that they possibly can. And it's a rough time. And again, I speak for all businesses in town, and I think we just need to really work on just helping our community.
Making it easier instead of hard.
Not make us have to jump through hoops. Honestly, it's a lot of hoop jumping, and COVID put some pounds on me. I don't have the energy anymore. So
thank you all very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tice. Thanks, Amanda. To add on to that, to the council, if you're interested in considering this, obviously not tonight, but at a future date, the specific issue I think that that was run into the other day is that food trucks require in any of the districts, I think besides C1 and C3, which is a very narrow Route 1 South and kind of desert road area, required to be in conjunction with another use. It's a really strange wording. Sarah's nodding her head. She remembers when we developed that language probably 6 years ago or 5 years ago, which was just amended a year ago or, you know, in the past 10 months. So just to kind of draw your focus to specifically that they're kind of, you know, prohibited in the downtown area, except in coordination with special events. And special event definition is nebulous at best. So I think the problem, that's something that definitely needs some more attention and maybe some thought about whether it's whether that's wise or not. That was obviously chosen by the planning board and the previous planning board and town council, but I think it's based on the feedback we're getting. I haven't heard anyone who's happy with that decision. So probably put that on the radar for your consideration in the future to change those regulations.
Please do, Peter. I think the sooner we get that moving through the process, the sooner we can change it, and businesses like what we just heard from will have some relief. So let's not linger on that.
Is that a planning board thing and not an ordinance committee thing?
It's a zoning ordinance thing. It's specifically prohibited in most of the zones besides C1 and C3 is a permitted use. So
And that would be the responsibility of the planning board.
It's got to go to the planning board. It's ultimately the council's say, but
right.
You need a recommendation from the planning board to change zoning. So, yep. And it may be as simple as changing other things that it can be done and maybe not allowing it as a permanent use in anything beside the C1 and C3 zones. But the current process is, to say confusing, I think is a polite way to put it. It has to be in conjunction with the special event, which there's no real standards for. There are standards, but they're not hard and fast standards for special event permits. So it's very open to interpretation.
And Dan, if you know this business owner, maybe you can also reach out with the financial assistance that the town has in place for businesses that have been hit hard by COVID. Very attractive terms on microfinance to help with refitting or whatever the needs might be. So thanks for taking care of that.
Yep, we'll do that.
Peter, anybody else raise their hand or would like to address the council?
No, Mr. Chair. And I think everyone else here, at least that I recognize, is maybe here for other items, so.
Okay. All right, so that concludes our public comment period on non-agenda items. Our next item is the 7th order of business. Take action on the following items as read by the council chair. To consider action relative to adopting the September 1, 2020 consent agenda. Be it ordered that the September 1, 2020 consent agenda be adopted. This was all included in the package. There's a couple of items on there about donations to the library and the Gould Trust Fund. Any reason why we should take any of those items off of the consent agenda for discussion? None seen, so we have a motion to adopt the consent agenda. We're ready to, oh, go ahead, Councilor Riley.
Second, I second.
Second, thank you. Second the motion. We're ready to take a vote. Councilor Riley,
Yes.
Councilor Pilch,
Yes.
Councilor Tracy,
Yes.
Councilor Lawrence,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. Consent agenda is adopted as presented. Thank you. Our next item is item number 139-20 to consider action relative to participation in the Maine Municipal Association Workers' Compensation Incentive Program. There is an elaborate whereas resolution prepared as part of the agenda. And we have some presentation of materials here with us, Deputy Chief Paul Conley. There was also a write-up in the package. Before we get to any votes on the resolution and the conclusion, Peter, do we want to have a little bit of context and description of this?
Before you even get that far in this presentation, we have before us 139-20 in the read. It says Maine Municipal Association Safety / Workers. It says composition. Should that be changed to
Compensation, yeah.
compensation, please? Can we make that amendment? Workers' Compensation Program.
Give me a paragraph number here on the order or the resolution, Councilor Riley, so I can find it.
It's underneath the heading that's the statement we have to Freeport County Council, copied to you from Paul Conley, dated 26/2020 August. And then the it states.
It's on the handout, Peter.
You're talking about the memo.
Oh.
Subject line amendment.
Sorry, I was looking at the resolution.
We don't need to amend the memo.
No. Paul, you can correct that as you speak. How about that?
Okay.
I'll give you just some background. Paul can give you the details. Paul's not here. Paul's, as you know, one of our deputy chiefs at the Fire Rescue Department. He's here as the chair of the Town Safety Committee. As a little background, that's an employee-led committee established by our workers' comp provider, which is the Municipal Association in this case. And they work with, so we get inspections by potentially Department of Labor. We get those occasionally. Surprise inspections. We are not subject to OSHA, but we are subject to Maine State Department of Labor as a government entity. That's how a municipal subunit of the state. That's how it works. So the safety committee works with both the Department of Labor and our workers' comp and our loss and liability carrier, which is the Municipal Association, to identify issues, to work on problems that arise. So that includes doing inspections. That includes reviewing workers' comp trends. So they'll look at scrubbed records that will, that'll describe injuries in the workplace and things like that without the identifying medical information. And they're able to look at things that are potentially trends or identify things that make recommendations to the town to improve things so that we have less, both that benefit both the town and our insurance carrier. So we have less workers' comp, less potential for injuries. Like the one that I almost had on camera in front of you is I tripped over my power cord getting back into my seat. We almost had a workers' comp case recorded on TV. So I'll spare you. Paul, do you want to give some background on what this new program is and kind of how the old program went out as well?
Yes. So good evening, folks. Little background is that over the last number of years, we've had a program called the LEADER program through Maine Municipal. in which they had a staff member that come down, would meet with us, each department, and review our compliance documents and some safety aspects, and just that we have accident review and committee meetings. And that was a relatively easy process to go through. I have to say our departments do extremely well in maintaining the required documentation and policies in place. What the program did lack is some financial incentive based upon performance. And in the documents you have here tonight in this program is tied towards a tier system. And if we meet all 3 tiers annually, then our workers' comp fund does receive a 10% reduction. And so we've got some work ahead of us just to make sure that we're all compliant with the new document, laid out well and in place. So, but the burden of a lot of this work now is self-inspection. So we have to inspect our own facilities. And the way that will handle out is that I won't be inspecting the fire department. I work here, it's my building, and I wouldn't catch some low-hanging fruit, if you will. Whereas Earl and maybe Suzanne would walk through here with the checklist and might find some things. And conversely, I would go to Earl's shop. So that's just one of the metrics of what we will be doing. And just the things that are in place, so we communicate, that we have a safety culture here that's supportive of one another, and that it's just bumped up with this resolution here tonight with the council is just bringing it one level up in the management spectrum of a program. So I'll entertain any questions.
So this is just a continuation of MMA. It's just a different name.
Yes, essentially.
Thank you.
Slightly revised program, but same concept, incentivizing us to do better at workers' comp. But we were participant in a similar program before.
All right, any further questions or comments for Deputy Chief Conley or the manager? Councilor Pilch, could I prevail on you to read the lengthy resolution and the motion?
Yes, sir. Whereas the town of Freeport is a member of the Maine Municipal Association Workers' Compensation Fund, hereinafter WC Fund, and whereas Maine Municipal Association, hereinafter MMA, provides risk management services and workers' compensation coverage, and whereas MMA developed the Workers' Compensation Safety Incentive Program, hereinafter the program, to help reduce the incidence and impact of workplace injuries by implementing WC claim best practices, and whereas MMA will provide necessary written program information and offer assistance to participants, and whereas WC Fund members that participate in the program and complete the required activities will have the opportunity to earn a credit to their annual contribution, and whereas the town of Freeport is committed to providing a safe environment for its employees, citizens, and visiting public, and whereas the program will help enhance such an environment and promote a self-sustaining culture of safety with participating members, now, therefore be it resolved that the Freeport Town Council elects to participate in the MMA Workers' Compensation Safety Incentive Program.
Second.
All right, any further questions? Thank you very much, Councilor Pilch, for proper recitation there of a lengthy resolution. Been moved and seconded. We'll take a vote. Councilor Riley?
Yes.
Councilor Pilch?
Yes.
Councilor Tracy?
Yes.
Councilor Lawrence?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Thanks very much, Chief Conley, Deputy Chief Conley, for shepherding that through. Good luck in that work.
All right, thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you, Paul.
That concludes our action items for this evening's agenda. We have 3 topics that the council will be engaging in informal discussion as printed at the end of the agenda. We have some time allocated here, which are guidelines for how much time we may spend on these topics, but is not required. The first one is a brief discussion from Jessica Malloy, our finance director, on changes to the county tax levy structure and how we pay our taxes to the county. You've got a report in the package, council agenda package for that this evening. Peter, is there anything to add to that report? It's pretty straightforward in terms of.
Nope, and I'm giving it as Jessica Malloy's supervisor. So, yep, Jessica and I both met and we agree that this is the direction to go. I know that the council wanted us to come back and formalize that recommendation, but what it essentially does is it splits up the 6 months out of the 18-month budget that the county has adopted. So our annual assessment's about 1.1 million from the county. So it would be, between $500,000 and $600,000, half of that amount for 6 months out of 18 months. And it splits that up over essentially 5 years and lets us tack on roughly 100 to 125,000 a year, as opposed to paying the full 600,000 in one lump, which will keep the tax increase very small. The only downside to doing it this way is that the county will pass on any TAN costs, which are tax anticipation notes, as they operate in arrears. So if they need to borrow for that money, of that $500,000, the aggregate of it countywide, is 20 to 30 million. So any portion of that they need to borrow on an annual basis to fulfill their operating costs in the 6 months shortfall, like they have been doing in the past, they're just going to proportionally pass on to the towns electing for a 5-year repayment plan. That's not going to be any more than what we're already, that's what we're doing right now. The county passes a TAN every year, takes out a TAN every year to pay our bills because we don't collect the taxes until halfway through the year. So it's not going to cost us any more than the current process is costing us now. It's not a penalty. We just won't realize the savings until we get to year 5. The good part is if we, at any point in time, say the financial situation doesn't look so grim in 2 or 3 years, and we say, hey, we'll take on that extra $100,000 or $200,000 to finish up the payment, we can make it at that time and avoid those, few $1,000s in carrying costs for the entire length of the program. So it's essentially, the negative is that we'll squander the opportunity cost of, a few $1,000s a year in savings until we get to the 5-year mark.
All right, this is all a result of the change in fiscal year by the county government.
Yes, and it's a smart move. We fully endorse it because essentially those borrowing costs that the county are incurring every single year to fund operations for 6 months out of the year will go away when they do this. They'll be like the towns and cities that collect far enough in advance so they don't need TANs.
Right. Councilor Riley?
This is also part and parcel. Metro, we did the same thing by changing from annual year to a fiscal year. Are there any other areas where we're still dealing with annual years? We actually operate on fiscal years, so are we all clean now?
Yeah, all of our government units, the school collects monthly for their operational expenses, so they're probably the most current with collections versus expenses. We get 12 bills a year from the school district for their monthly portion. The county collected essentially a full 6 months late, to 6 to 9 months if you didn't pay on time, late for funding. And we collect biannually in November and May to pay for so we're running 3 months in arrears. Essentially, we won't collect our money that we're operating on now until November, December, but that's fine. We've got enough fund balance to cover that. So we're probably the second worst, the town, in terms of collection times of the 3 taxing entities, but we're well within comfort margins to operate. So,
thank you.
Peter, do we have an action item on this to where we have to take a formal vote coming up at a subsequent meeting, or is this just going to happen administratively?
We do not. We're just going to tell them, please bill us that way. They don't need any. The default is that they'll just continue to bill us the way that Jessica and I are recommending if we take no action. The action you would need to take would be to budget $500,000 extra in this year's budget if you want to, or $600,000 if you don't want to do this. We'll need to raise an extra $600,000 of taxes roughly to pay off the
extra half year.
Yep. Yeah. So the do nothing option really is defaults to what we're recommending. If you don't like this option and you want to raise taxes to pay it off in 1 year and then see realize the decrease in taxes in years 2, 3, 4, and 5, you don't need to do anything tonight either, but during the budget process next year, you'll need to vote to we'll need to raise that amount for county taxes in the budget by $500,000 to $600,000.
So seeing that there'll be a different council looking at that budget, we'll probably address this item again next budget season with a slightly different council and who may have a decision that's different than the one we're proceeding with tonight.
Correct, and you can make that decision at any sequential budget year following too. So any of the following 4 years, councils can make that decision.
So that's important, I think, for the rest of the council to know that while we're not taking a vote this evening, we're not giving up our chance collectively as a community to have an influence on how this adjustment in fiscal year gets paid off, whether it's over time, a portion every 5 years, or if we do it, click it all at once. And it'll come up again during the next budget season, a very brief 6 months from now. Any other discussion from council on this other than I think we proceed as presented from the manager and the finance director? Right, okay, seeing a bunch of nodding heads, I think that's the direction we're going to go, Peter. Our second item for other business is an introduction of the proposed complete streets policy. Hooray, this is where some balloons would be coming down if we were more onto it with our Zoom backgrounds. Councilor Riley, this item was included in a printed version of our packet. Could you please introduce the complete streets policy and a little bit of background?
So last year, we went through and changed the ordinance involving traffic and parking and creating a new name for the committee called Complete Streets. And as a result of that, we changed the ordinance and that's in place. But it was felt that we don't really have an understanding of the term complete streets. So this document, the Complete Streets Policy, is designed to do that. And it's also designed to spell out the actual actions that the committee will take in involving any decisions that are going to come from the committee in items that are presented to them. The work on the Complete Streets Policy has been in progress for over a year. And Doug Leland has led us through that process very well. Geraldine Campanelli provided thoughtful comments for us to reflect upon as we were working through this. And it was then finally approved about a month and a half ago now by the Complete Streets Committee. And then we took it up in ordinance and reviewed it in ordinance and found that the document was to our approval without asking for any changes and are recommending it to council for consideration. In this, we have the options as council now to do 3 different things. One is to approve as written. Second is to receive as written. Third, and more importantly, because of the time that this has been involved in creating this, it is suggested that a public comment hearing also be held. And I would ask the opinion of our Council Chair, John Egan, to voice his position on this going forward.
Thanks, Councilor Riley. I think one of the slight variations on your 3 steps there is that we also need to make sure we've heard from staff, particularly related to the compliance and consistency that are outlined in the Complete Streets Policy. I participated in that committee and I agree completely with your comments about Chair Leland and Geraldine as well, providing excellent comments. We had a lot of participation from a number of different stakeholders. So this is just a first, quote, introduction or socializing the idea. I know councilors have only had a couple of days with this document, so we're certainly not ready to take any action or make any firm recommendations. But I know that the manager has advised that there are still yet some comments from staff that could be circulated in a conversation for a subsequent meeting. So I think that might be our next step. But I would like to hear from other councilors who've had a chance to read it.
And actually, before we go that far, I would ask that we recognize Doug Leland, who is chair of Complete Streets, to voice what he would like.
Doug, we got balloons for you and everything. I'm going to move you over.
All right.
Get ready.
Well done.
You can't handle this party, Mr. Leland.
There are balloons. How about that?
How about that? Very good, Dan. Thank you.
I'm sitting in tonight primarily because you, for the first time, had an opportunity to take a look at the policy, and rather than just a draft, but looking at one that's gone through ordinance. And here to clarify any questions you may have on it. I guess as an overall comment, both in regards to the policy that you have before you, and I have had the opportunity to see staff comments, which you haven't had. So this will make more sense perhaps in a few days. But I would say this overall, that if this policy were presented to the National Complete Streets Coalition, which by name is a national organization, and that's all they do is look at and advise on, and actually, when requested, they will grade complete streets policies for municipalities. I believe the one that you have in front of you would do very well in front of any assessment that they would take on a complete streets policy, both in terms of substance and structure. That said, I look at this as a utility document. It wasn't put together with an expectation that it was going to be a comfortable, fun read. It's here to make sure that the intent of a complete street policy captures the elements of a complete street policy, so that those who need it most will understand what the town is attempting to achieve. And I believe this document does that as well. There is opportunity to, on the what I would say on the margins, to make improvements to it. There always will be. I always think of the credit that our founding fathers got for the Constitution and how well they did in crafting that document. But it too has been amended over the years, and I would fully expect that this document, along with other ordinances in town, would have the same. The two items that I would put in, and I would just ask you to make a note of it because it'll make more sense when you look at other comments. The two items that are more substantive would be, one is the distinction between private right-of-way and public right-of-way, and where does this policy intersect or not intersect with that? This policy has attempted to, is based on public right-of-way. The complete streets jurisdiction is the public right-of-way, but there are places where those come together. In fact, any place a road touches private land, it comes together. This policy in number 10 on the policy actually creates the pathway to integrate the public and the private, but it does not get specific on how that gets done, because that's not a conversation that I don't believe it's a conversation council has had, or planning, or project review. And we touched on it in our conversations, but as a single committee, we weren't in a position to resolve that on our own. I think there is opportunity there, but that's one area to look at. And once you've had that opportunity, I can comment more on that. And the other is that this is a policy that is designed to, it's looking forward. It's the Complete Streets Committee providing to council a policy for consideration, and it's to help provide guidance for the town and those who are interfacing with the town, especially on commercial development projects, as to what our expectations are. But it is it is just that. It's a policy, it's guidance, it's forward looking. And the one piece that's going to be important as part of that forward looking, and this kind of will end up on Peter's desk more than anyone else's, is just the management of this policy, because it does involve management of town issues and staff issues and time management issues. This policy doesn't try to fit the policy into exactly where the town is today. It's trying to establish the best possible complete streets policy with the expectation that as a town, we can figure out how to manage that today and going forward.
Thank you, Doug. Appreciate your guidance and your well thought out reasoning behind this. Also your access to resources that a lot of us don't have that luxury. So that's great to be able to rely on your connectivity to the larger user group that's out there. As Councilor Riley noted, we have a number of steps that we can take. There is no action presumed for this evening. I believe the next step, and I'd love to hear from other councilors, but I believe the next step is we'll have a conversation in a more formal setting, potentially even a public hearing, or at least a public input section, as well as being able to review staff comments on the policy as it's been presented. Keep in mind, this has already gone through the ordinance committee. So it is following a pathway. It would be not unreasonable to think that after a meeting in which we've had some public input and a chance to discuss any staff comments, that we could then recommend this for adoption. Councilor Riley?
I will hold until anybody else has any input before I make a statement.
Tracy?
I support the opportunity for comment. I'm looking forward to seeing what staff has to say. That was a sort of a loose end at the ordinance committee, and obviously I'm interested in what our community members have to say about the policy. I appreciate Doug's work on this ordinance. He has a history of taking on substantively difficult and complicated issues and really digging in and helping us do the work to put our ordinances in place. And you've done it again, and thank you very much for that hard work. You can see it in the product. I do have one question which I raised at the ordinance committee, which I'll just raise again, which is that in section 6A1, an exemption from the policy is a project that conflicts with or is prohibited by law. And I still think that's confusing because it looks like we might actually do something that conflicts with or is prohibited by law. So I just wonder whether we nix that. But other than that, I'm looking forward to the comments.
Great, thank you. Dan,
I
you have
will.
anything?
I didn't mean to cut over Councilor Pilch who had his hand up.
I won't be long. I just wanted to say thank you to Doug and to the whole committee, because it looks like there's a lot of work that went into this and a lot of thought that went into it. And it's a document that reads relatively well and easily, even though there's a lot of meat in it. The only comments I had written down were related to sort of reactions from staff, so I'll kind of hold those until we get staff comments. And the only other note that I wanted to make, I don't think it requires a change, but more of a comment. There are performance measures that are listed in the section 11B. And there's one that talks about the number of miles of multimodal pathway that are completed each year. And I think that's of interest, and I would certainly want to understand how many miles we get completed each year. My comment is that there may be other metrics we might want to look at in addition to that. It may be that there's a certain pathway that is more significant than others, and we may want to invest in making that better, wider, more separate, something other than pure number of miles. So it's essentially a quality versus quantity argument that I'm making. so that we don't focus exclusively on number of miles, but that there are other things you may want to consider as well. And I think the policy is written in a way that would allow other performance measures to be included. It's not saying that these are the only ones, but that these are the initial performance measures. So like I said, I don't think it needs a change, or just a comment that we might want to think about either now or in the future.
Great, Peter.
Yep, I would just add, we've got a few comments, may have additional, but got comments from our engineer and planner, and those, we just went through those today. So I talked with Chair Egan, and we didn't think that just getting them out to you, an hour before the meeting was probably the time to review them now. So I'll forward those out. I think Doug Leland and I were copied on those, so we'll forward them out to you. They're more just open-ended question, kind of points for thought, suggestions, things like that. So the council may think some of them are great and want to make changes to it, or may not. So I don't think there's anything earth-shattering there, but there's some good kind of points made that will kind of, I'll forward those around. I'll send that out via email after the meeting tonight to everybody, so you can have a chance to review them prior to our next meeting.
The cabinet by the stove on the far.
Great. So, Sarah?
I just had a question. I mean, are we going to get, I haven't seen the staff comments yet, but it would be helpful, if appropriate, to have the Complete Streets Committee maybe respond to those comments. So we have both at the meeting, we have the comments and then the response. So we're sort of have the whole world that we're looking at, given that we have some time.
Doug, Doug Leland, do you think that's doable to get the committee to look at them and comment, or in the absence of the committee, at least some of the members?
Yeah, I think it's doable. It won't be, unless we have a special meeting, it won't be doable as a meeting until October. But in terms of circulating the comments and asking for others' input, that's certainly doable.
Yeah, and I don't think you'll be making any decisions as the Complete Streets Committee. Maybe you could circulate to the members and they can provide comments directly to the council individually. So that way the public meeting at which all the information is reviewed is the council meeting when it's next considered. That way we're not doing any inappropriate public meetings, over email or anything.
Okay, well, I will send them out to the committee and ask that if they have any comments that they forward them directly to you or to all counselors, or? Yeah,
it can be me or myself and the chair and the vice chair, whatever you're comfortable with, Doug. Yep. So I think that's good. And that way any of the comments can be reviewed by the council. There won't be a motion from the committee, yay or nay on things, but the individual comments can be kind of absorbed and the council can make changes if necessary.
Right. I'm not trying to accelerate any kind of a process. I'm just thinking that we only have 3 meetings left with this council before the election. So it would be timely and also to reflect and recognize and honor the commitment and the work that's gone into this for this council to take action on the Complete Streets policy. So looking at that calendar of 1 more meeting in September and 2 in October, it would be, I think, advantageous for us to have this scheduled for the first meeting in October with discussion and a chance for the public to comment at that meeting with action taken in the subsequent meeting. Does that seem like a reasonable time frame?
I think it works for us staff-wise. Is that okay with you, Doug Leland?
Yep. The timing is up to you. I'm just here to support you.
Great. So let's keep that as a frame structure of how this particular item gets concluded. Councilor Riley?
So I was going to propose be it ordered, but I think we can wait until our meeting on the 15th to have that same statement come out of being ordered that a public hearing for October 6th, that would be the date of the next council meeting, but we don't have to do that now.
We don't have to do that now. We don't have anything prepared now either. So, but that seems to work just fine. I think if we can accomplish those things.
I think we'll notice it as a public input session. It won't receive the public hearing. It's not a public hearing by law, but we'll publicize, maybe put up on the town website and advertise what the document is and when you'll be taking comment on it. But it won't meet the threshold for a public hearing, so I don't think you need to take any motions tonight to set that. We'll just put it on the agenda, the chair and I and the vice chair.
Okay, very good. That's a good plan. Doug Leland, thank you very much again. And Dan, thanks for the balloons. That was a nice touch. Our next item, our last item on the agenda this evening is a discussion, our first discussion as a council. And it's slightly unfortunate that we don't have all 7 of us here this evening. A chance for our council here to have a conversation about how to engage with community members and their interest in opening a conversation about something called an equity assessment that the town may ponder and consider. In light of, we've all gotten some communication from a number of the organizers of this issue from our community. And in light of the fact that this is a national conversation happening in every state in the country, or at least I think it's happening at least some in many states. Can't say that with authority, but it's an opportunity that to bring up the conversation because it is happening absolutely in our state. And there's been plenty of coverage about race and bias issues from plenty of activities in our larger cities in Maine. We had an event organized by members of the public back in June. That was a rally and a march through downtown that was incredibly attended, way more attendance than I think many people expected. And what we're going to be engaging in this evening is essentially a follow-on to that, similar to what process has already engaged with our police department, being shepherded by Councillor Pilch. And so, Dan, I don't know, do you want to provide a little more context for opening the conversation this evening?
Sure. What I can do that might be helpful is to set some context, because I think there's a lot of moving parts, and I know that there's some confusion about the different initiatives that are going on. So the good news, I think, is that as a community, we responded vocally, actively, and in adequate numbers, I think, to say that we as a community want to make progress on this issue. It's not an easy thing to do. It's not like we can wave a magic wand and fix everything, but there are some concrete steps that we can take. So along those lines, some of the things that are going on that I'm aware of, one is, as Councilor Egan referred to, there's a committee of people who kind of raised their hand to volunteer to be involved with reviewing the policies of the police department, that the chief and subsequently everybody else in the police department has been very enthusiastically supportive of. So we've been going through, I think there's like 92 or 93 policy documents that they have, and we're marching through them one at a time, at least the relevant ones, to review them in the light of, A, just they need review periodically, but B, also especially in the light of equity issues, bias issues, race issues, things like that. If there are any parts of the policy that need to be addressed or changed because of that, we're opening a discussion and we come back with recommendations. That committee's met, I think, maybe 2 or 3 times. And happy to kind of answer questions on what's going on there. But that's one activity that's going on, is the police policy review. I'm aware of an equity assessment and follow-on work that the RSU has started to work on. They've hired a consultant to help them with that. I think the assistant superintendent is shepherding that. I know the RSU has their hands quite full lately, so I haven't asked for an update on that because I know they're very busy with getting back to school and the new COVID methods. But I know that work is ongoing. They did jump on that, and I expect more to happen there. In addition, I've heard that there's a loosely organized group of the public from 3 towns, Durham, Pownell, and Freeport, that are getting together or hoping to get together to discuss the issues at large. I don't know that they have any specific actions or agendas that they're putting out, but I think they're convening, as I understand it, to have a place to have that discussion. I think that's in the very, very early stages, but I know that that's going on as well. So what's being proposed tonight is a fourth initiative. It's different from the first three. Again, it was initiated by the community. They came to the council saying, we should also be looking at town government and making sure that we don't have any implicit bias in the way we govern our town and welcome people into our government, into our town hall. So they're asking us essentially to sponsor a committee to take a look at that. And I think the first step of that might be an equity assessment. To come in and review policies, I imagine similar to what we're doing with the police department, and say, are our policies appropriate and are they equitable for everyone? So I think this is, like John said, just the introduction to the discussion. I'm speaking on behalf of what I think the community is asking us to do. So I don't want my comments to say that I'm speaking on behalf and saying this is what should be done. But when the communities come to us, I support what they're doing. And I hope I'm representing it accurately. I think we have somebody from the community who's got something to say to kind of help add some context as well. But that's my contribution to kind of setting the context behind this.
Thanks, Dan. I just want to further clarify that the reason why this is on the agenda tonight is because we've been approached by members of the public to have a conversation at the council about this. It is not in response to an incident or a dynamic or a complaint or a situation. This is a start of a proactive conversation that we as a council here can take some comfort and reassurance to know that many communities are dealing with this in different ways all over the state and all over the country, and that it is not inappropriate for a community like Freeport, which has predominantly white-led council and white town government, to consider the ideas that there may be some implicit bias that is overseen in some of our policies or some of our procedures of whether it's hiring or whether it's management or just how to engage with the town. Again, it's not meant to indicate or implicate anything. This is not coming out of someone complaining that there was any evidence of discrimination. This is really a proactive chance for the council to listen to its constituents in the community and organize that thought process into a group that can then engage with the town directly and review some of the documents that Councilor Pilz just mentioned. So we're just opening the conversation this evening, and I'm pretty sure we have a member of the public, which we'll get to in just a second, but I wanted to first hear back from initial reactions from councilors. We didn't, because of public meeting laws, we don't have a chance to kibitz about these agenda items before the meeting, which is why we have them listed as other business so that we can have an informal conversation about it. What are folks thinking about? Councilor Lawrence.
Well, I think it's a great idea that we go and review all these policies, and I think it's good to look for bias. Do we have, or inequities, but do we have we have a definition of what we're looking for, or is it, I kind of feel like this is it, you know what I mean? I think that's probably a place where we should start. And what are we looking for? You know, we say inequities, but what does that really mean? But I think it's a great idea to go through and review all the policies and look for those kind of things. And just to review them and make sure it works for everybody.
Right. I think that's a very valid point, Chet. Councilor Riley?
With us, this is not just our issue as been stated, it's throughout. And we do have some organizations which may or may not have begun some work on this. And can we get some feedback from GP Cog? Can we get some feedback from MMA on these items so that we're not reinventing the wheel and we create a document that speaks differently than, let's say, Yarmouth may create or Brunswick may create or any one of the other communities? I think it's something that if we all input, then we come back with something which benefits not only ourselves, but it also speaks common language to every community within the state of Maine.
Important point. Yep.
And I know that there has been some coordination going on with other towns. I know we've been in contact with Cape Elizabeth, who's organizing a similar effort, I believe. And I think Falmouth's doing something similar as well. So I've encouraged the community to continue doing that, to reach out to other towns and coordinate efforts. If we're all reinventing the same wheel, there's certainly a lot that can be done by doing it together. So yes, that work is ongoing. I don't know of anything that GPCOG is doing, but it's worth asking the question if GPCOG or MMA is doing anything similar.
And actually, it's best to try and funnel these things through GPCOG so that all the communities are, and funnel it through MMA so that everybody can be involved rather than just going hitting and missing between one town and another, but really promoting it, because GPCOG can speak to Cape Elizabeth as well as South Portland and as everybody, the other 14 communities.
Yeah, one of the issues that was brought up is that the issues South Portland and Portland are facing in particular may be very different than the issues we're facing in Freeport. Freeport may look different than Westbrook and so on. So I think there's a lot that we could gain from a coordinated effort, and there's probably some other things that we might need to do on our own as a town.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think we want to hear from our local residents to inform what's happening right here, and then, maybe consequently, if there's any recommendations, we can funnel those recommendations into a larger pool to see what other communities are looking at. But I think we want to start immediately with in our immediate area, which is our own community and our residents. Councilor Tracy?
Well, I think I'm supportive of the effort. I think we are always looking for ways to engage residents, and here we have a situation where residents are engaging us proactively. So I think we should use that energy and really try and harness it. And a committee sounds like a good idea. It has to be, I would assume, appropriately sized so that it's not too, it's not too hard to make recommendations, and that it should have a good cross section of perspectives, so that it reflects not only those who have brought it to us, but also maybe those who are business people or those who wouldn't have thought about it, but they have a perspective about it. So I think it's important to let people know, if we do this, that this is an opportunity, and give a wide range of people a chance to participate if they choose.
Great. Thanks everyone for chipping in. Peter, I imagine we have, I don't have the list open in front of me here, but I'm sure we have a number of participants who are on the attendee list that are interested in speaking about this. And if you
have one, yes, we've got 4 people in the audience right now. One of our media friends and 3 residents. I'll bring over Ryan, who's got her hand up. Is that okay, Mr. Chair?
Yeah, I was just going to say, if those members in the attendees are interested in speaking, this would be the chance to use the raise hand feature. And I see Ryan's name on the screen. So Ryan, welcome to the meeting and to this topic, and look forward to hearing from you. We've chatted or emailed back and forth a number of times, although I've not had the pleasure of meeting you in person yet, which I get to say with just about everybody I work with these days, working from home. So welcome to our meeting, Ryan.
Thank you so much. Glad to be here. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Great. Well, I'm here as a member of the loosely organized group that Dan referenced. I would describe us, the march in June was really powerful for me because I felt like I found people that I had been looking for here in Freeport. You know, I've been really wanting to talk about anti-racism and equity issues, and here were all of these people that I could now do that with. And we know that it's really, you know, the march is wonderful, but it's what happens in the months and years after that that's really going to matter. So this Tri-Town Equity and Inclusion Coalition is the name of the loosely organized group, and really it's just a way for folks to find one another, to maybe do some work together or some advocacy. And one of those groups that has kind of found each other has really drafted a statement that they wanted to have shared tonight. We wanted to have shared tonight. I'm kind of playing a supportive role. It's Anna Brown, Kate Olson, and Gimbala Sinkare, who have really crafted this statement. So I want to just read that to you all as an informational piece, and I'll send it along as well, and then happy to answer questions or pass them along to the group.
Please do, Ryan. Thank you.
Great. So the question is, why should a town like Freeport do an equity assessment? The protests and demonstrations that have been happening across the country and recently here in Maine have come about because Black people in this country are not treated the same way as white people. A lot of research shows us that racial disparities in the US result in very different outcomes for Black, Indigenous people, and people of color versus white people in areas like employment, wealth, education, homeownership, healthcare, and incarceration. Being classified as a person of color in this country means that you do not have the same advantages, opportunities, or experiences as white people who are classified as white. For instance, the average Black worker earns just 62% of what a white worker earned in 2018. Black people are 2.5 times more likely to die from COVID-19 relative to white people. Black women are 243% more likely than white women to die in childbirth. And Black men are about 5 times more likely to be imprisoned than their white counterparts. For Black men in the 18 to 19 age range, this figure is almost 13 times higher than white men in that same age group. A database of fatal police shootings, not deaths by other means, reveals that fatal shootings of Black people by police is disproportionately high. 13 per million white fatalities versus 31 per million Black fatalities. Research shows us that across Maine, people of color encounter significant barriers that negatively impact their health and economic well-being. Black, Indigenous, and people of color make less money, live shorter lives, and face obstacles to accessing and engaging in Maine's civic and economic life. This is playing out with COVID-19, where Maine has the highest racial disparity in the country, with Black people comprising only 1.4% of the population, yet representing 27.7% of cases as of late June this year. According to census data from 2013, 1 out of every 2 Black Mainers lives in poverty, compared to the national rate of 27.6%. For the same period, the poverty rate for Indigenous people in Maine was 1 out of every 3 people. From slavery to Jim Crow to our modern system of incarceration and law enforcement, Black people in the US have always faced danger and discrimination because of the color of their skin. People of color have to deal with disadvantages from systemic racism, which has accumulated over time through formal and informal policies and practices of individuals and institutions. There's a lot of research telling us that many of us are biased, even though we don't even realize it. These biases are built into institutions, laws, and policies as well. That means that Black people and people of color do not have the same advantages, opportunities, and experiences as white people. And this is true in Maine as well. We want our town to be fair and safe for everyone. As a town of mostly white people, it's important to commit to understanding the ways in which our community may be recreating race-based barriers, and then to work hard to address those barriers, as well as the systems and practices that create them. Racism feels like a really big issue that we can't solve, but if community by community across the country we work to uncover, recognize, and change policies, practices, and systems that contribute to racism, that would contribute to major change. As citizens of Freeport, we can commit to understanding where there might be policies and practices in our own town that generate racist outcomes. And an equity assessment would be just this, a commitment to learning and, if needed, changing. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Ryan. I appreciate hearing that, and please pass on to your fellow committee members our appreciation for sharing that and bringing it forward.
Sure.
Again, tonight is just to have an opening of this topic and to figure out what our engagements might look like and how we might go about participating, forming and encouraging a committee to begin this process. It's important, I think, before any group like this convenes that there is an agreement about an objective and sort of what does success look like, what does progress look like, and what is the eventual goal of the committee's efforts. And so those are very likely going to be some questions that will be answered early on, long before there's any review of a document, is just to have the members of that group understand what they're all gathered for. Councilor Riley.
This is probably going to be a very ongoing, long-term discussion taking place. And one of the things that I've experienced over my time on council is when we have our district council meetings, that this is probably something that we should bring up within the district council meetings for people to discuss as an agenda item for the general public. Make that district item agenda a little more meaningful.
Certainly, and hopefully in the coming year, we'll get a chance to have those district meetings in district specific locations where they're much more effective to hear from folks than the platform that we have right now of Zoom, which is allowing us to function, but is less than ideal for gathering public input. I think that's an excellent idea. Anyone on the council here have an idea of how, or maybe Peter, you can give us a little bit of guidance about some of the mechanics of a committee formation or group formation? Does, do we have one or two councilors then join a committee, or does the council try and organize that? I really don't want to sort of, over structure this and eliminate the efforts that are coming from the community. So I'd much rather be sort of listening and engaging rather than saying, here's how it's going to go. But a little bit of guidance, please.
Before we get that far, is there anybody else that wants to speak on this before we get into more substantive discussion amongst us?
Good point. Thank you, Councilor Riley. Any other raised hands? Okay. Well, if we see some, we can certainly bring those folks over. Sometimes it takes a little bit for people to muster up the courage to speak at a public meeting. But so, Peter, what are some options, or what are some previous precedents for how councilors have engaged with a citizens-driven topic?
Yeah, so for the formation of a committee, commission, board, whatever you want, to have any official authority, duties, or function by itself to be an official, government entity, if you will, that needs to be an action of the council. Those are laid out in our administrative code. It's not required, but you could establish something like that by ordinance separately, but all of our boards and committees are typically in the administrative code. For short-term things like this, a lot of the time the council, creates specialized working groups with, a sunset date and a very narrow definition of what they're going to do. A board like that wouldn't have any authority of its own, but I don't really think that's what you're looking for here. I think you're just looking kind of at a work group that may have a council member or two or seven, if you all want to be involved, which that's not what I'm hearing, but there's no reason that can't be established as a council subcommittee. It would have no official authority. Its only authority would be through the action of the council when you brought something back to it. So really open to a bunch of different ideas, whatever you'd like to see.
Councilor Tracy?
Well, I wonder whether, I mean, we had a similar, it wasn't the same subject, but we had the active living committee a few years ago, and that was also a sort of, my sense was, a citizen-driven group that ultimately got blessing to be a temporary committee with a sunset, and then they came forward with a report. We provided some funding to help with the report, and then they made a recommendation, and then the council ultimately accepted that report. I mean, that structure seems logical to me. I could be missing something, but
I'm just curious. I agree with you, Sarah. I remember when that kind of came about. I'm just curious to make sure that the scope of work of such a group that we're contemplating here get access to the documents that they might need access to in terms of HR policies or management documents, in terms of how the town runs and how we engage with the public, et cetera. So I heard Peter say 2 times the group has no authority if it's not an official council committee. And I want to, I guess, kind of just check that and say that while it may not have authority in terms of being able to suggest an ordinance change that comes to the council at the next meeting, like, for instance, our ordinance committee, that the group is not sort of out on its own string somewhere, that it is organized from an intent from this council to move forward to tackle these issues and engage on this topic. So I don't know how to sort of blend between those two things. I really like the idea of it being a citizens-driven working group, or whatever phrase we can put on that. But I'm very interested in hearing down the road what the processes look like from folks like Ryan and others that she mentioned earlier by name, to engage and actually use some resources that are already in place, and to come up with some definitions, as Councilor Lawrence indicated, so that we have an understanding and agreement on the vocabulary, and really, put a nice frame around this. So when that work is ongoing and the efforts of that group have been laid out, that that there's a pathway that someone coming in, taking a look, could see what it looks like, and it wouldn't be this squiggly line somewhere, that it would sort of have some structure around it.
My suggestion, John, is that if this group is formed, that there should be at least one council member on that group, because the council member then can bring forward any of the recommendations that committee or group formulates. And we do it all the time. So this is, to me, a very logical way. Again, it is the responsibility of the council person to bring forward the position of the committee, and not necessarily the position of the councilor. Hopefully they're in agreement, but
yeah, and there very well may be more than one councilor who's interested in pursuing that, for sure.
And to be clear, John, Mr. Chair, my comment about authority is directed at authority independent from the town council. So if you're going to give them duties or jobs, or tell them to go forth and accomplish something with any enforceable authority, that has to be established in ordinance. It doesn't mean they don't, in terms of interacting with staff and town committees and things like that, you'll have no issues like what you're anticipating. I don't think where anybody will be stonewalled. It's just
I just wanted to make sure that if who knows what might come out of this, hopefully some really good stuff, but that I guess that the town staff, and then you in particular, understand that this effort is coming from a council endorsement for it to move forward. So that's great to hear about a willingness to participate. And I think we have a perfectly clear example of Chief Nurse and her staff engaging with that citizens committee and really having a very transparent process. So
you'd have the same reaction from any town staff, you know, whether it was brought forward by a single resident with the concern to look at everything, or the council tells us to do it, we will participate in whatever is set forth.
So any specific ideas for structure or how this goes forward? Councilor Pilch.
Yeah, I was just about to draw that same parallel to the police committee work, which has been supported internally, so we didn't face any resistance. But in this case, I think because the intent of this committee might be to review the town management and government, including ourselves and Peter and everybody else at Town Hall, I think it is important that it comes from the council as an initiative, or at least the council supports the initiative. For structure, I would suggest, I'm open to ideas here, but I would suggest maybe forming an ad hoc committee that the council directs with some goals and objectives in conjunction with what the community is asking us to do, but directs to say, given these goals, objectives, we ask that you report back to us as a council within some appropriate amount of time. And then the committee can come back with suggestions, recommendations, observations, whatever they choose to come back with. But that's how I would do it. I would say it's an ad hoc committee. I would like to work with the community members who brought the idea up to formulate what those goals, objectives would be. And then assuming that the council agrees with them, we can then say, we would like this to sort of empower this committee, and we'll have to figure out how to populate it and how to get people on it that have that broad representation that I think Councilor Tracy was mentioning before. That's my suggestion.
That sounds quite reasonable and structured. Councilor Tracy?
I think that sounds logical. I think we should just make sure that we have opportunity. It's the opportunity for the public to weigh in on setting the goals and objectives. So I understand there's sort of a chicken and egg issue going on. And certainly we do have a motivated group of people who may be able to more quickly put together some goals and objectives, at least as they envisioned bringing the committee forward. But then we should allow other townspeople to weigh in before the council really defines that as, you know, sort of the formal goals and objectives of the ad hoc committee or whatever it's going to be.
Yeah, I agree with that. So Dan, just to clarify, we've heard the term working group and now you're using ad hoc committee. Peter, are those essentially function at the same level of organizational authority, so to speak? They're not a full endorsed committee of the council by statute, but in response to more along the lines of what Sarah was saying earlier about the active living, that it's an ad hoc committee that has a start and an end and a specific scope of work to focus on.
Yep. Yeah, there's no legal, a lot of people get hung up on that, but there's no legal definition between calling something a board, a commission, an ad hoc committee, a working group, anything like that. It's just actually what it's created, how it's created, and how it's tasked by the council that really has the ultimate say in what it is. So if you vote by order to create a working group, ad hoc committee, whatever you want to call it, and give it a task and say, report back to us when we do these things, you would just have to take a separate way of creating a committee if you wanted it, for example, to be a standing committee that reviewed citizen complaints, you know, of discrimination and took action and had some authority to do that, versus a committee that's going to go out, find facts, come up with recommendations, and bring it back to the town council. So there's no real requirement on how you create something like that. It could be a simple council order with the name, the task, the charge, and your time frame for it. That's been used before.
Okay, Councilor Pilch.
Peter, if we do that, is it required, I assume it is it required that all the work of the committee be done in public and noticed and done through, in this case, Zoom?
That's a great question. It becomes a public body when you make it a public body. So I would have to look up the statute on when and what the statutory references to actually creating it as a public body, and what that threshold is. I'd need to do some research on that. I wouldn't worry about that so much. I'd get the structure that you wanted, and then we'll figure out if it becomes an official committee. So for example, what Councilor Tracy referenced, the active living, what was it at the beginning, Sarah? Was it the active living advisory committee, or was that what it became?
I don't remember how it started, but
Doug Leland's left us. I think he was involved at the beginning on that too. But we had a working group essentially that was a town committee, right? And it took minutes and all that kind of stuff. So if it's doing the business of the town, if it's led a volunteer committee that's kind of appointed and created and tasked by the council, I think you become I think it meets the statutory threshold of becoming a public body that has to be noticed, that has to be recorded. A little bit different than what you've got with the police review going on, where it's kind of a staff-led. It's not a body that's been appointed by the town council. You have yourself who's involved in it just as a member of the town council, but there's no, that's kind of what I'm talking about a committee that has no authority outside of it's going to report back. You know, it's working within the staff kind of function as an advisory committee to the staff, as an advisory group to the staff. That could be anybody that the chief and you guys who are on that group kind of deign to be, in the group. So.
Yeah, I guess my initial reaction towards the efficiency and effectiveness of the group coming together is to lean towards the latter and have it be potentially less structured so that the group can sort of find its own harmony and not necessarily be completely constrained with all of the rigor of the public notice, public meeting, recording of all the meetings, et cetera. But that's just kind of an initial reaction in terms of just trying to get some efficiency going. On the other hand, I don't want anybody to think that the group is operating with some kind of cloak over it. And I'm sure the committee, the members of the public don't want that either. The whole idea of this topic is inclusion. But I'm struggling a bit with how to manage that. I know, we have a number of constraints as a council here in terms of gathering and when we can talk more than two of us on any particular subject, et cetera. So I'm just trying to find a happy medium for the group to be able to, which is largely going to be almost entirely of members of the public who are not used to this kind of structure and rigor. I'm just trying to be mindful of keeping that group as fluid and loosely organized as possible so that they can get to their business.
You may want to give it some thought as the entire council then, because I think if you vote to create something and task it, I would default to the direction of it becoming a government body subject to records. If it's something that kind of happens on its own and it's driven more by citizens, even if one or two councilors participate in it and it's not created and defined by the town council, I think you have a very good argument that it's then therefore not an official town body or an official government body that is subject to those laws. So before you vote to create it, think long and hard about whether you want to be responsible for it, meaning you, the town, we have to, take over for noticing and making sure they meet all those criteria. So
that's the dilemma that I'm fighting on or wrestling on right now. Councilor Lawrence.
Yeah, I think the definition that Peter just had is what we really are trying to get to here, because they're going through documents looking for recommendations to make. They don't have any authority, right? They're just making recommendations that would be going to maybe, or actually, I don't think it's even ordinance. It'd be going to the town and say, or Peter and saying, hey, these are things that we think we need to look at, right? So making it formal, I'm not sure that that's really what we need to do.
Councilor Riley.
Sounds like we're talking about a workshop coming up, whole council, an additional meeting.
That's possible. Councilor Tracy.
I hear the point about having the group be able to meet and be flexible, but I also, in the comments that were provided to the council, I read into it that they wanted it to have some legitimacy, that the town is doing this. And So I do have some concern about just saying, oh, okay, whoever's interested and whatever counselors are interested, just go off and do it and then come back and let us know. That is a little bit different, and maybe everybody gets comfortable with that, but I think there needs to be a little further dialogue as to whether that satisfies the request.
Yeah, and that's exactly the dilemma that I'm trying to wrestle with right now. Councilor Pilch?
I thought about this as well, and I've kind of changed how I think about it along the way. So in the beginning, I thought it would be easier for the group to accomplish what I think they wanted to accomplish by doing it more or less on their own with some contributions from those of us who want to be involved, and then just provide recommendations as public citizens saying, hey, council, we think this is what you should do. So I discussed that with Brown and Kate Olson at our last meeting and suggested that to them, that they might be able to operate more efficiently as a non-public committee. And they had some interesting points, and I don't want to put words in their mouth, but I think the gist of what came out of the discussion was a couple of things. One is, it's important that they thought it was important that the council endorse this as it's an introspective group, right? We're looking at ourselves, we're looking at the town hall that we're more or less responsible for managing through Peter, so that oversight should be coming from us. And I think also it was there, and this is more coming from me, I think there's a question about, well, you know, given that this came up as an issue and it was amplified by voices in town, what did you all do as counselors about the issue? And if what you did was, well, we let a group talk about it and we let them, you know, tell us what they thought, that's a lot different than saying, well, what did you do? Well, we decided that this was a really important issue, and we asked a group to look into it and give us some recommendations because of the weight we thought it deserved. So I don't think we're at the point where we're going to decide tonight and say, yes, it's this, no, it's that. But I do think it would be good to come back and ask for more input from the public at large, beyond just the 3 or 4 people who have been organizing it so far, to get clarity on, you know, the rules and regulations of it. Would it be a public body or not? What that would mean, and start thinking about how we would ask people to be a part of it. Because I don't think it's a you know, that's an easy question to answer. Is this a group of 5 people, 7 people, 9, 12, 20, 30, 40, 50? And how do you choose those people? So these are all questions that I think deserve a lot of discussion. So I'm happy to keep on having those discussions. For efficiency's sake, happy to have some offline and bring some ideas to the council. But I think some of those discussions should happen in public as well.
Councilor Riley?
It sounds like we got this, speaking like a farmer, we've got this great big hayfield out there, and we're looking at, you know, how are we going to cut the hay? And we have all this loose ends that are in front of us right now. Maybe if we paused this and brought this back up in discussion at our next meeting again at the agenda item, some of these things can be sorted out, because I don't think we're going to be capable of doing that tonight. But I think if we put a little more time into it between now and the next meeting, things will be a lot clearer. And so that would be my suggestion, that we continue this discussion at our next meeting.
Okay, just so that I have a sense of, at least amongst the 5 of us, if A is to have it become a committee of the council, where the council reviews a scope and a set of goals and objectives and has some hand in membership of the committee, if that's A, and B is a couple of us or one or 2 of us join the citizens group, which is then granted access by direction to the manager for the committee to review policies and go about its work without a sanctioned structure from the council. If that is B, and there's probably variations of A1 and A2 and B1 and B2 in there, but generally in terms of a contrast, our are people more in favor of an A structure or a B structure?
I'm in favor of a C structure.
But before we get to C, let me just hear what other folks have to say.
I'm in favor of the B structure, and the fact that we're talking about it, I think points to the fact that we're serious about this. And then if they come up, if the committee or the group comes up with recommendations and we act on them, some of them, may not be all of them, it may be none of them, but that says a lot instead of, and I think it'll be better. I think we'll get better information if it is a kind of a closed group that is working not in silent, but doesn't have a lot of outside influences that sway it. You know, if you're working with a mob, it's very hard to get anything done. Whereas if you're working with a small group, you can get a lot of things done, or at least get the work done and say, okay, how about this? And then you have the group talk to other people. But so I'm in favor of a B type structure where you come in and you can look, you know, we're looking, all they're going to be doing is looking through documents and seeing what's going on, coming up with definitions, that kind of stuff. So I'm in favor of the B type structure.
Sarah?
I'm in favor of doing something a little bit more formal than that. I think there might be a way to split the baby there. You know, like I said at the beginning, I think it's really important to make sure that the committee itself has a diversity of perspective. And I don't see how sort of licensing a small sort of closed group of people, even though it's more efficient, and I don't dispute that, to come up with a bunch of recommendations, you know, that seems a little bit antithetical to the diversity and inclusion message. I don't think that precludes doing some work in smaller groups. For example, the Active Living Committee, when I was on that, projects would be divided up into smaller subsets of the committee, and they would go off and they would work on it and they bring it back to the bigger committee. Now, maybe that's too much structure and it weighs people down, but I think I would prefer something that where if we're going to really say this is important, then I think it's also important for us to say, and we want people to participate. And here is the opportunity to be on this committee if it's of interest to you and you think you have something to contribute. And we can limit the sort of interaction or, you know, sort of the inability to move by maybe limiting the numbers, but at least we've given a variety of people an opportunity to participate.
Dan?
Yeah, I agree. I think either A or B would be great. I would prefer A over B. I agree with all the things Councilor Tracy said. And I think one of my fears is if we went with option B, you also create the opportunity for there to be multiple groups. So there may be a different group that forms with a different take on how they think that this work should get done. And then we have we would be faced with getting recommendations from different groups that might compete with each other in terms of what they're asking us to do. And that puts us in an odd situation as opposed to saying, look, we have a group that we're going to hear recommendations from. We encourage people to be a part of it, and we'll go out of our way to try and make it very inclusive. My experience from the Police Review Committee was, in hindsight, I wish we had done that as well, because I think there was some confusion and some pushback and some people that found out about it later on and said, well, why wasn't I included? And they felt as if they were excluded when it was just, they just didn't happen to be around for the meeting when they asked people to raise their hands. So doing it this way in a more public manner, I think kind of prevents us from making that same mistake again. So I would prefer A.
Okay. Doug, what's your option C?
My option C is to present both A and B to the group and see what they would choose out of this and then go from there. Because realistically, we represent them. and it's what they are wishing to provide us with. So that would be my position on this, is to allow them to make that choice for us. Thank you.
Okay. Peter?
Yeah, I don't think that there's going to be any issue. I'm leaning to what Dan's saying in that regard, though. I don't think there's going to be any issue. You know, these are all public documents, I think, that we're talking about, policies, ordinances. I mean, half of them, 3/4 of them are on our website. The other half are probably right over here on my shelf. You know, they're something that I could provide to any group in 30 minutes or less. And, you know, I can have talked with people about these things. Judy talks with people about these things all the time in the public. So it's not like you need to do it to bless a group so that they have access. But the question is, you're going to have multiple groups. You're going to have a group that starts this and then somebody else saying, well, I don't like the direction they're going. I'm going to do my own investigation and present my results to the council. And if you don't say who is on this committee in at least some definitive manner, how do you give one group more, you know, if there are more than one group, how does one have more credibility than the other or more sway with the council? You'd have to consider all viewpoints. And I don't really think that's what you're looking to do. So I may have just talked myself out of making it informal and into making it somewhat more formal.
Okay. Well, we've been chewing on this for well over a half hour. And I don't think we're resolving too much here this evening, other than it's a great first step to start the discussion. For our next meeting, maybe Ryan, if I could ask you to bring back to the community group the specific question of maybe a couple of things. One, how big of a group does your constituency feel the committee needs to be? Secondly, while I think we heard, and certainly in previous communications by email and my participation in the committee, that the community group wants this committee to have some authority for sure. And I haven't heard a word this evening that says that you're not going to get that. But in terms of structure, along the lines of what we've just been discussing, to get some feedback about is your group ready to adhere to some of the rigors of public meetings and recordings and postings and such like that, so that there can be a fully transparent process. I don't think there'd be opposition to that, but it is cumbersome and requires an organized thought in terms of how and when people meet and getting agreement on times, et cetera. And then, so if we could hear it from you and your constituency before our next meeting, then we can take that information and incorporate it into an action item that we can have on our following agenda to discuss, a discussion item on our next agenda on how, hopefully all the council members are here, on how we put this together, having had a good conversation about it this evening. I want to make sure we get this right when we start it. It's a long process and people are going to put in a lot of time and a lot of commitment. And I'm just interested in making sure we get it right, that everybody's feeling positive about how it's going forward. So, and I have a feeling we're probably going to end up with something in between the sharp contrast that I just drew between A and B. So, Dan, if you wouldn't mind maybe sketching out a couple of bullet items in a summary format of what you might feel the committee structure looks like. You've had a little bit more exposure and experience with working with the police group, for lack of a better term, the citizens group working with the police department. So, and that'll give us something to chew on, and you can maybe get that to the manager, and that can be as maybe a frame for our agenda item on our meeting on the 15th.
Yeah, I can't resist if I'm unmuted saying words. So I'm gonna say, I'll just say, yeah, I took pretty much verbatim notes from this discussion for our crew. And I wondered,
Yep, you're
Am I
good.
frozen?
You're on. Go ahead, Ryan.
Sorry, my internet went frozen. I was just saying I took really careful notes from this conversation to discuss with the group, and we'll bring this back to them. And I also, is everybody on this, sorry, is everybody on this call a town councilor? Or, I mean, I know Peter, you're not, but is Sharon?
No.
No, Sharon's the council secretary taking the minutes. So, but
John, Sarah, Dan, Chip, and Doug, those would be the town councilors?
yes, everyone that you see except for Sharon and I are the councilors. There are two others that are not here tonight as well.
Okay,
Yeah,
very
so
helpful.
Caroline
So,
and Adam are both employees of the town, right?
Helpful. So yeah, I'll definitely bring this back and we'll get back to you.
And please, before you do anything else, Ryan, get a copy of the minutes of our meeting so that you can compare what your notes are as to compared to what Sharon has heard, because you may have heard something entirely different.
Yeah, Sharon, we'll go head to head on our minutes and see who wins. Okay, thanks, you guys.
Very good. Thank you very much, Ryan.
Thank you, Ryan.
And this will all be on Facebook. Just find the town's Facebook page and hit play and scroll it over to approximately an hour and 15 minutes in, and you can start relive the whole thing every single night if you want on your big screen at home.
Right.
Like I do every night.
All right, so I think that's an action plan for this topic to come back on the 15th. Thanks, Dan, for just doing a bit of a summary there to help guide our initiation with how we form this ad hoc group. Thanks very much for everyone's participation this evening. Really appreciate that. We do not have any other items on our agenda for discussion. Councilor Riley.
And I move to adjourn.
Second.
We have a second. We'll take the vote. Councilor Tracy.
Yes.
Councilor Lawrence.
Yes.
Councilor Pilch.
Yes.
Councilor Riley.
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Our meeting is adjourned. Thank
Good
you
night,
all.
everybody. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
2 weeks.
Good night. Sorry I was late.
Don't worry about it, Chip.